Hello there, and welcome to the show. Welcome to the ongoing, slightly bewildering, and undeniably loud reality of America in 2025. Massive protests have erupted across the United States and internationally in response to President Donald Trump's second term. Stay tuned for the latest updates on this significant surge in public dissent. If you thought the first Trump term was a roller coaster, the second term is aiming to be that same roller coaster, only this time it's on fire. The sheer scale of these demonstrations indicates a level of discontent that's hard to ignore. We're talking about a broad coalition of people, united by a shared sense of, "Are you kidding me with this?" It's a beautiful tapestry of frustration, and tonight, we're going to unpick a few of its more colorful and frankly alarming threads. We're going to dive into the what, the why, and the what fresh hell is this of the protests shaking the nation and indeed parts of the globe. We'll look at who's marching, what they're shouting about, spoiler alert, it's quite a lot, and what this all might mean for the political landscape. I don't think people understand the magnitude of the hands-off protests that swept the nation on April 5, 2025. Hands-off meant hands-off reproductive rights, environmental protections, the free press, and their collective sanity. This was a coordinated effort, a symphony of placard waving and slogan chanting. The coalition of groups was staggering. Seasoned activists alongside first-time protesters, environmental groups with healthcare advocates, civil rights organizations with teachers' unions, and even competitive birdwatchers. Key issues were numerous and critical. Concerns over attacks on reproductive freedoms, fearing a national abortion ban. The administration's love affair with deregulation had environmentalists seeing red. Proposed cuts to social safety nets, education funding, and anxieties about democratic norms. The organizational heft was impressive. Synchronized marches in dozens of cities from New York to smaller towns. The visual language was striking. Seas of signs displayed anger, humor, and desperation. The hands-off demonstrations were a nationwide temperature check, and the diagnosis was clear: the country is running a fever. Why isn't the world buzzing more about the global ripple effects of American politics? You might assume that with all the chaos happening stateside, the rest of the world would just be munching on popcorn, glued to the reality show that is American politics. And to some extent, you'd be spot on. But guess what? Some folks around the globe aren't just passive spectators. They're jumping into the fray with their own voices. Take the pro-Palestine protests in Melbourne, Australia, on May 24, 2025. These weren't just a handful of homesick American expats. These were massive demonstrations led by a coalition of Australian activist groups. Melbourne's message was loud and clear. The fight for Palestinian rights is a global one, and they weren't going to let it be drowned out by the political circus across the ocean. The key issues raised focused on the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, demanding an end to the occupation, advocating for Palestinian self-determination, and challenging the Australian government's foreign policy stance. The Melbourne protests also showcased the power of digital age activism. Organizers harnessed social media to rally support, disseminate information, and coordinate with global solidarity networks. It's a striking example of how a cause rooted in a specific regional conflict can resonate with broader global political anxieties. Chapter 3. A Protest Power Hour. Your timeline of Trump term, 2 tantrums, so far. Alright, to truly appreciate the sheer velocity of public pushback, let's take a whirlwind tour through the protest highlights of early 2025. Think of it as a greatest hits album, if the hits were all expressions of profound societal unease. Our timeline begins in February, a month that, much like a surprise visit from your in-laws, felt significantly longer than it actually was. Almost immediately after the inauguration, small, spontaneous demonstrations began to pop up, like political whack-a-mole, often focused on specific cabinet appointments or early executive orders. One of the first notable events was the Academics Against Autocracy rally on February 15th, primarily centered around university campuses. This saw professors, students, and some very well-read librarians protesting proposed budget cuts to research funding and what they perceived as an attack on academic freedom. Then, March roared in with the Emergency Climate Convergence on March 10th. Spurred by leaked documents suggesting a rollback of even more environmental regulations, thousands gathered in Washington, D.C. and other major cities. Mid-March saw a series of Defend Our Doctors demonstrations, largely organized by healthcare professionals and patient advocacy groups, responding to renewed efforts to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. Chapter 4. The Why of the Yelling, Unpacking the Protest Baggage. So, we've seen the what, the when, and the where. But what about the why? The underlying causes are multifaceted and deeply rooted. Immigration enforcement, budget cuts, and the influence of Elon Musk are major drivers. There's also a pervasive unease about the erosion of democratic norms. Chapter 5. What's next on the protest playlist? Marches, mayhem, or meaningful change? So, with all this marching and shouting and impressively creative sign-making, the big question is, what's next? Where does this surge of public dissent go from here? Well, if you listen to the protest organizers, they're just getting started. Future plans involve a multi-pronged approach. Firstly, expect more large-scale demonstrations. Secondly, there's a strong emphasis on local organizing and targeted campaigns. Beyond the big national marches, groups are focusing on pressuring individual members of Congress in their home districts, engaging in voter registration drives, and supporting candidates in upcoming local and state elections who align with their values. Thirdly, there are discussions around escalating tactics, including more direct action, civil disobedience, and potentially even coordinated strikes or boycotts. The potential impact on American politics is the billion-dollar question. Sustained widespread protest movements can shift public opinion, energize voters, and put immense pressure on elected officials. One major area to watch will be the upcoming midterm elections. These protests could serve as a powerful mobilizing force for opposition voters, potentially influencing the balance of power in Congress. Outro: the unfinished symphony of shouting. So, there you have it. A snapshot of a nation, and indeed parts of the world, grappling with a political reality that many find, to put it mildly, indigestible. The sustained protests indicate a growing resistance to the Trump administration's policies. Stay informed and engaged as we continue to cover these significant developments. It's clear that the initial shock of a second Trump term has given way to a determined and remarkably organized opposition. What happens next is, of course, uncertain, but the energy, the commitment, and the sheer numbers involved in these protests suggest that this story is far from over. Until next time, try to find some joy, even if it's just in the absurdity of it all. Good night.